All right, everybody, we're welcoming Mark Waid back to the show. Mark, it's great to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
So last time you were on, Justice League Unlimited 1 was about to drop.
Hmm.
Now we're having this week issue 3 come out. So I wanted to touch base and just get a sense of how things are going and talk a little bit about the story. So with a couple issues already out
Hmm.
and DC just killing it with the Absolute Universe and the All In Initiative, how has fan reaction been for you? What have you been hearing from your fans?
It's been great. Come on, Dan Mora. Everybody loves Dan Mora, and but beyond that, the reaction has been really positive, which very much pleases me. And I will say that 8 out of 10 questions I get about Justice League are about Airwave,
Really?
which kind of makes me happy.
Yeah, well, I do want to touch on that too, because last time you were here, we had a sort of a cliffhanger ending in that first issue with Airwave, and you mentioned that you weren't even sure where it's going to go. With
Right.
issue 3, everybody, we have something that's revealed. We're not going to spoil it. Pick it up
Yeah.
this Wednesday when it comes out. But I have to ask you, did you at that time know that this was the direction you were going
No.
to go? And there's other
No.
things. So,
But
so
it
this
but
is new.
it has worked out well. This seems to be my process, whether I like it or not, which is throw grenades, in the air and throw grenades at future Mark Waid, and then he'll figure it out. And that makes it spontaneous, but also, I know what the end game is, but how we get there, I wasn't sure on, and now I have a much clearer idea.
Well, what's so great about it is this is something else we talked about last time you were on, kind of the epic scope of the story that you and Dan are telling, but you're grounding it with like humanity and kind of touch points, and that's exactly where we're headed with Airwave, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's Look. That's why I always break down an issue of Justice League into the big threat, the big team, the big fight, but also breaking off a couple of characters to interact in ways that we maybe haven't seen before, whether that's Star Sapphire and Black Lightning in issue 1, or whether that's John Jones and Dr. Occult in issue 2. That's the stuff that makes it a story, because that's about people. And it's really easy to get lost in giant slugfests, with especially when you've got the entire DC universe at your beck and call. It's but that's it's easy, but it doesn't make a fulfilling sensation. I don't think it makes a great meal. I think it's better if you're doing all that stuff as a background to, okay, but here's the meat and potatoes of the personalities. Here's how these characters on a one-on-one basis interact with each other and why they're people.
Yeah, it's a great point that you're making, but in a way, and we've talked about this before as well, Justice League Unlimited is sort of the center, title of the DCU. So if you look at what you're doing there, because you're balancing the humanity and the action, like you said, but there's also a lot of plate spinning. We talked about that before. But then if
Yep.
you expand that out, that same feel, that's really what we're getting in with the DC universe as a whole, because we're seeing ramifications
Yeah.
and sort of, not that you have to pick up everything, but if you're reading, all along the Watchtower
Mm-hmm.
or
Or
Project
Challenges of the
Adam
Unknown or
or
Project
Challenges of
Adam.
the
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that
how's
is,
that collaboration been with the other?
it's been great. It's been great because Paul Kaminsky and his editorial team, who are sort of the behind the scenes engineers of all this, have somehow found a magic formula that allows us to tie into each other and look like we're expanding the universe as we go in ways that make logical sense without compromising the stories that we individually want to tell. That's the secret sauce. That is the hard part, is making it about, is there a logical, organic way to fit Challenges of the Unknown in what's going on in that book into Justice League? Yes. Is there a way to do it where you screw up my story? Yes. Are we going to do it that way? No. And so it makes it feel expansive without making it feel, because when you start intruding on other creator stories, that's what makes it feel restrictive, right?
Mhm.
This is why it feels expansive.
Yeah, and more connected than it has in a long
In a
time. And
long
and
time. Yeah.
yeah, and it's one of the things that we as DC fans, we love the continuity, love the minutia, and I know that can be challenging at times because you got people missing the forest for the trees, as it
Right.
were. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, They sort of showed up in the first issue. We get more details, see them for the first time, and that's the big kind of villain organization of Inferno. So, what can you tease about them? Do you know more about them and where we're
Yeah,
headed with them now
that's going to
than
be
when you started?
yeah, there's going to be some major reveals happening in 4 and 5 that will give you a much better sense of who's underneath those robes. The thinking going in was, okay, we had the entire DC universe under the Justice League umbrella. We need a big threat, and it can't just be, oh look, it's Mongol again, or it can't be, oh look, it's just Despero. It needs to be big. And the idea of super terrorists who are not trying to knock off like one government or trying to take over one country, but instead are trying to take over the world in ways that are a little more realistic. In issue 1, they made a play for the world's economy. In issue 3, they've made a play for the green, which gives them complete control over the Earth's ecosystem. So these are the kind of big swings that these villains are taking, because if you're going to do a book called Justice League Unlimited, the villains have to be taking big swings.
Yeah, and the fact that you pulled in the green, and again, we're not going to spoil everybody, but the last page of this issue,
Yeah.
oh wow,
Yeah. See, that's what I want.
wow.
I want you to get to the last page and go, okay, we have hope. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What are you doing? What are you
Yeah.
doing? Well, another aspect of this, and we sort of touched on it. How big it is, how big the story is.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about process, right? Because as you mentioned, you didn't know exactly where how you were going to get there with Airwave. Now you have a little bit more of a plan. But really, the other thing, all these threads, some of it goes back to absolute power, because we have this whole idea of powers being mixed up or people having lost their powers. I mean, do you plan it out, like, because some of the storylines are going to overlap, as some start winding down, so is it like a big whiteboard with like bars like how do you keep track of all that?
In a perfect world, a smart writer would do that. I'm not that smart. And I'm always working on 5 different projects, 5 different DC books at once. So it's mostly up here. To me, the fun of writing and the thing that keeps me energized and moving is the discovery. For instance, I knew John Jones's powers had gone, but when I wrote that scene, I wasn't sure where they had gone. And then when I figured out as I was writing issue 5 where they had gone, oh man, that's huge. That's the perfect place for them to have gone. And that opened up entire, which would never have occurred to me when I was writing issue 2, right? It didn't, I just, sometimes you have to relax into the idea that sometimes ideas just take time to gestate. And sometimes you need that subconscious time for ideas to burble up, and you have to leave room in your outlines for these sudden inspirations that give you great detours. So that's really the process. I mean, I kind of build the plane while I'm flying it. I have a basic idea, and now a strong idea of where the Airwave stuff ends and what happens there. But getting there, I think that's part of the reason why it feels so fun and spontaneous as you're reading the books, is because that's kind of how they're being written.
Yeah, and I imagine that's like you said, the fun and the challenge for you.
It
As
is.
one thing starts winding down, then now what about this? I need
Yeah.
to kind of turn my attention over there.
Yeah.
Uh, Another thing that we get in issue 3, everybody, I was a big fan of the Terrifics in that line, the Age of Heroes line and what have you. We get a little bit of a reunion. Was that something you knew from the beginning, or was that something that kind of happened organically as well?
That happened organically as well. That was okay. I know Plastic Man's powers have gone, and they seem to have been replaced by Phantom powers. So what happened there? And I had in the back of my mind the terrific stuff, but it wasn't until I got to that scene that I realized the emotional heart of it. And hopefully it is wrenching, and hopefully it is horrifying. And Dan Mora took what could have been a nightmare scenario and made it even more hellish. So good for him. It really is hard to read that scene, I think.
Yeah, that scene sort of encapsulates what we were talking about before. It's got heart. It's an interesting scene. It ties in with everything that's come with absolute power, what have you, but so much emotion as well. So it's got both. It's got both.
Look, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. At the end of the day, you can have the most spectacular fight scene in the world, but if there's no emotional stakes to it, if you're not as a reader invested in the people, and watching the inner conflicts and the external conflicts and just the emotional turmoil they're going through, then it's not going to stick to your ribs.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure, everybody out there listening, you're like, man, there's a lot packed in this issue. Yes, yes, there is.
Yeah, there is.
And that's the point. And there has been throughout. So we always know with a team book, that's always a struggle. I'm sure you could, 40 pages every issue and you'd have no no
Right.
problem, right? With
20,
the
20
dream.
pages, 20 pages every issue I've got.
Yeah.
It is always a matter of packing 30 pages of plot into a 20-page story. But I think we do a good job, and Dan Mora is the reason for that because he can draw anything. And if I need 7 panels on a page, he can find a way to do 7 panels on a page. He's just that good.
Well, now that you've got a couple issues under your belt, you mentioned you're working on 5 and 6. Anything that has surprised you? You talk about kind of building the plane as you fly it. Anything where you've come up with something or something that you planned on doing that's changed? You're like, oh, just did not see that coming at all.
Not big, smaller stuff like I hadn't thought about putting John Jones and Dr. Occult together in a scene until I got to that scene. So a lot of it is just, hey, look, Impulse is in issue 5. That's the perfect place for him. And that is a surprise to me, but now we can make something out of that. So it's more the character combos that come naturally as I look at the vast sprawl of this universe and start picking out relationships. Those are the things that surprise me.
Yeah, and it was so great to see Dr. Occult. For those that aren't aware, that like really the first DC superhero, like predating
Yes.
Superman. Even.
Predating Superman, yeah, exactly. And long forgotten, he pops up every once in a while in his trench coat throughout the DC universe, but not very often. But he was the first of DC's Golden Age heroes. And frankly, Martian Manhunter, I would make a case, is the first of DC's Silver Age superheroes. So I like the connection there. And I like tying their history together in a way that you didn't see coming.
Yeah, with what happens with Dr. Occult in issue 3, it seems like he still has a major role to play.
He does. We won't see him for a couple of issues because there's too much going on, but he will play a major role going forward. Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be fantastic. I can't wait for it. And, we want to be clear, everybody, the Trinity is still here. But you are just doing such a fantastic job of, introducing these characters, whether it be Airwave or, Dr. Occult, Firestorm showed up. We have Phantom Girl in this issue. It's a celebration of the DC universe.
Celebration is the best word for that's a really good word for it. And I think that's absolutely it. This is the time for it. Readers seem primed for it. I think we've hit upon the right formula to make people happy. And it is a celebration. In my mind, every day is a celebration of the DC universe. So why not share that?
Yeah. And again, you have the perfect artist to do it. I'm sure Dan's having just a blast. When you are talking about, hey, this character's coming up, that character, does he always know who they are? Does he have to go look them up?
Sometimes, I always give him reference if I need to give him reference, like, here's what the Clock King looks like or whatever. What's amazing about Dan is that I can give him reference on these older characters that have been largely forgotten and tell him point blank, look, some of this costume design looks a little stodgy. Some of it looks very old fashioned or corny. Please feel free to adapt or change or move, do whatever you need to do to make this character look contemporary. And what we always get back is that exact same costume, but the way Dan draws it makes it look contemporary and fresh. So I don't know what that alchemy is, but I'm all for it. He also digs the fact that he has that sort of George Perez itch of wanting to draw everybody in the DC universe at some point or another. So he never fights, he never pushes back, he never argues. Instead, he just adds more characters in the background.
Yeah, I mean, he is just the perfect choice. His style is it looks modern, but yet at the same time, it's instantly classic.
Yep.
And he's the right artist to balance what we were talking about before, the humanity, those character moments with all the action.
Yep. Dude, if I could work with him and Chris Samnee on everything, I would be the happiest person on earth. If there were 3 each of them, I would keep them all busy.
Yeah, and you and Samnee are doing a fantastic job on Batman and Robin Year One as well, which we've talked about before. Well, I want to thank you for your time today, Mark. Any last thoughts? Anything else you want to share with our audience about issue 3 or what's to come?
or beyond. You were going to be looking at coming up a, I think the word goes out on this pretty soon. Um, a big crossover between Justice League Unlimited and World's Finest of all things. A big crossover. So that we're leaning into for the late spring, and I hope you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, we know we have a lot of Superman stuff coming up this summer.
Yeah.
Everybody, the film, which I'm sure you're really excited for. So yeah, that's fantastic. Remember, everybody, Justice League Unlimited 3 out this week from Mark Waid, Dan
Yeah.
Mora, and company. Be sure to pick it up. And Mark, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Anytime. Take care.